Vaughn, I'm struck by, several things you said. I mean, the concept of this is a team sport. I don't believe most employers see it that way yet, right? There's obviously some innovative leaders who understand that really well. You also talked about the kind of community sector, the third leg of what you're talking about, and it made me, reflect on one of the new partnerships we actually just announced yesterday. Kaplan is helping junior achievement with kind of what they call last mile hiring opportunities for students coming out of their high school curriculum, which is a very rigorous curriculum that's been in place primarily in Title I school districts. JA is not new; it's been around over 100 years. But in short, we're helping a lot of those high school seniors graduate with their SIE, which is an entrance into the financial services industry, an industry that's trying desperately to increase the diversity of the talent it's been hiring. And I look at it as like, well, it's organizations like Junior Achievement that have, that are serving 5 million students in school districts, primarily Title I school districts, where, we have a disproportionate number of underrepresented minorities, first generation students, et cetera. But I was blown away by your stat of 90% diversity in Futuro Health programs. Like, can you just unpack a little bit more of that? Is that coming from various community partnerships? Like, that's the thing most employers are still struggling mightily to solve for. Like, they say they want to achieve it, but then you look at the numbers and they just don't seem to be moving. And how are you guys getting to 90%?
Well, it's a lot of intentionality, Brandon. And hey, by the way, I'm a graduate of junior achievement myself. I did junior
Ah,
achievement in high school.
Hey.
It's a good time for all companies to be leaning in and thinking hard about their talent needs, right? So in the high schools and middle schools are good times to do career exploration. So um, that's the time to invest in career exploration. And then if your industry has these credentials, especially if the skills are moving very fast, um, it's a good time to be working with your peers, with your trade association to develop a certificate. For example, in the energy sector, all of us companies came together and created an energy fundamentals, right? And made that available across the board to all high schools, colleges, communities, so that there could be broader exposure to those careers and what it took to land in those careers. And that's where group effort makes a lot more sense than trying to do it alone. And I actually learned that playbook from the energy sector. If you know, the energy sector has the electric entities, the gas entities, and the nuclear entities. And across the board, they were facing 20 to 50% retirement. And they had let their relationships with colleges and other workforce pipeline somewhat atrophy because their workforce had been so stable before that. And interestingly enough, what happened was the industry came together to work on, to focus on workforce development and challenged and invited every state to form consortiums of employer. Because here's where the point of competition should be. It should be at the end of the workforce pipeline, at the point of hiring. So we play together to create the talent pool, and then we compete at the point of hiring. Because the alternative is we have a talent puddle, right? And nobody wants that. It just drives up prices. So let's work together, as you know, Brandon, as you echoed. It's really a team sport, and it doesn't need to be an individual sport.
I think that's a great example. 10 years ago or so or more, I got a chance to go to an energy summit in DC, and forever I have said the best example of workforce development that I've ever seen has been PG&E. So I think it was just serendipity that I got a chance to meet you many years later. It's fascinating. I would say what's really interesting is with the current talent landscape, especially over the last year and a half, 2 years, evolving and changing, and employers becoming so desperate for talent. I think it's great. We're finally starting to see examples of ready to work programs, workforce development programs, but there's still such a mismatch. And I think just this language it doesn't match, right? We all are speaking something different. So what are some of the best practices I would say that you've you've really learned and honed in on from your past, present, and then obviously the future, Futuro Health, that you're going to lean into to help with this conversation?
Well, Rachel, you start with the three-legged stools of workforce development, right? Where each partner does what they do best, rather than try to overreach, because it is a team sport. So we all should begin with that, and it's worked from industry to industry. What I've been able to do is gain more insights on how to build collaborative relationships between education partners so that they're willing to evolve their curriculum, so that as a best practice, adults don't like starting from scratch, and they're not in the mood to get a degree, right? So how do we bring them back into education so that they can be reskilled? And it's usually in the form of a certificate or industry valued credential. And so that's the hook. So how do you put out that hook? And for example, Amazon Web Services made their curriculum available. Google Grow with Google made their curriculum available through Coursera. And so that's the hook, to bring adults back into education. And then when they take a bite of that apple, then they become more interested. We had an individual during the pandemic, laid off. This is a common story, laid off during the pandemic, never did anything in IT or health IT, took our health IT curriculum, which, by the way, was the Google IT certificate, Google IT specialist certificate. However, we thought that was insufficient for the healthcare sector, so we actually worked with Johns Hopkins to create what is the role of IT in healthcare, because there's so many different stakeholders, there's different privacy. So we actually combined three things, which is the Google certificate with the Johns Hopkins coursework, and then added the soft skills coursework. And that in combination became the health IT curriculum that this individual took. Well, he took it, he fell in love, and then he went on to pursue a bachelor in cybersecurity, ended up with 4 job offers, 2 of which were over 80K, and was, and that is a good story, right? And that's repurposing talent that was out there, but would have not considered these careers, and yet made a successful transition because of these hooks, these best practice strategies that we have put out there and employed.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because that's a perfect example of how you bring kind of a working adult back into education or training, or whatever we want to call it, upskilling, reskilling. In a lot of ways, though, as I'm sure you've seen, those same hooks are now working increasingly for traditional aged young people, right? Who we like, even the education benefits movement, right? It was really purpose for working adults who don't yet have their degree. Hey, I'm going to offer them a chance to get their bachelor's degree. The idea being they stay longer. It was a retention strategy. Right now, you're increasingly seeing 18-year-olds coming out of high school saying, I could do traditional college, live on campus, etc. Right? Or there's companies that will hire me right now. I can make some money and they'll pay for my college degree while I work there. So I might not be thinking about the role that I'm in there as a long-term career solution, but if it helps me get my college degree and it's funded entirely by the employer, it's what one of our colleagues has called the commercial version of the GI Bill. I go work for, this company for a few years, I get my college degree. I might have made some trade-offs on things like residential, campus life, but debt-free, work experience, right? I mean, you think of all the other factors, being able to maybe live at home because I'm taking care of a family member or a loved one, or I'm trying to save the money. So I've been fascinated by some of our traditional hooks that have been working for, older working adults, now also kind of being seen as attractive lures for the younger generation. And I think it's got all kinds of stuff in it, right? The rising cost of college tuition, scary, data about student loan debt, et cetera. But I'm just curious on that point, right? Like, have you seen any different levers for, kind of traditional age 18-year-olds coming into your programs versus working adults, or are you seeing more consistencies?
I'm glad you bring all of these ideas up, Brandon, because they all work. And one of my unfinished business in the public policy realm was how do you get more embedded work experience or have more colleges adopt those practices? It's much more commonplace in other countries. For example, even Canada, adjacent to us, has a co-op program where the work experience is built in, right? So you go to school and then you work and then go to school and work. And when you come out, you're much more ready for the workforce. And it's more of an exception here in the United States, and yet it's such an effective strategy for young adults to be able to land successfully in the world of work. So that's another way, definitely, that colleges should lean in, but it does take I'm sorry, that's another way for employers to lean in and be of help to create their own workforce, but it's also equally important for instructional redesign to occur to facilitate that for students, right?
Well, Brandon knows this, but I was a product of a really good co-op program throughout my undergrad. So I had 3 co-ops by the time I graduated, which was just an awesome experience. And I was worked for Deloitte starting as a junior and was hired on when I was a senior. So that was my entree into the workforce.
There you go. It worked perfectly.
It did work. In reading a little bit about your book, so selfish plug, I have it right here. Um, I've read a bit about coaching, success coaching, and I know that you also use coaches as well as part of your model with helping with student success, with helping with the demographics. We're hearing more and more about organizations leaning into that sort of guide that can help somebody sort of figure out their career trajectory, figuring out the skills that they have, how do they apply them, how does that translate into getting into an educational program. You've got this as part of your program, and how do you see sort of the role of the coach in the success of some of the students that you have and the folks that you're supporting?
So, in order to achieve scale, we have a lot of data science going on behind the scenes. We have about 30 million data points collected on our students, so that we know where they are and how these Future Health scholars are doing. But that's not enough. As you mentioned, you have to complement the scale with the live touches, right? Um, and it's the live touches that are not only the encouragement um, and the comfort, uh, but it's also to demystify some of these processes. Like enrolling in college is a very complex process. Even when we have streamlined it as much as possible, there needs to be some handholding through that process. The other place that we're finding a lot of the live coaching is helpful in the intervention. During the pandemic, we had almost 1,400 inbound calls by Future Health scholars for support, and almost 300 of them were around grief. So you're talking about populations that are experiencing here in California. It was the forest fires, the drought, the homelessness from the fires, and then the no Wi-Fi, no time to study, and then their family members became sick in the pandemic. So there's so much stressors on this population that you're going to always need a level of support to build their resiliency, and encourage them to complete and move the next step. Now, this population is also extremely resilient, right? So more resilient than the rest of us. So if they're able to make it through in a supported way, they will become good workers.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lesson we keep seeing over and over again. I mean, whether it's, success coaches or advisors broadly across, as you mentioned, Vaughn, all kinds of things. It's not just about, kind of the tutoring or academic support, right? It's all the, friction that we put, in the process of, applying or, choosing the right program or whatever it is. But it's also just all the wraparound supports. I mean, we say this all the time. I mean, the success of a student, especially one who is coming from a background where they were not fully supported, whether it's by family members or by good schools or whatever. 75% of the success is actually the wraparound support services, and about 25% of it is probably the curriculum or the education, right? And I think we always think, oh, there's just one magic lever. They just need the education. Well, there's a lot more to it. We've certainly been learning that, in the work that we've been doing, advising employees on just general kind of career thinking, and then what are the pathways they should go down. I know we're out of time for our session today, but I want to make sure folks know, if they're interested in learning more about Futuro Health, where should they go? Where would you guide them, Vaughn, in learning more about that?
Well, Brandon and Rachel, it's been such a pleasure to be with you and having this great conversation. If any of your listeners are interested in the allied health workforce and how to have solutions for growing that next generation of worker, please do reach out to us. We're at Futuro Health, so it's like future but with an O, futurohealth.org. So come visit us there.
That's awesome. Well, Vaughn, you are most certainly a bold leader in learning. We're delighted to have you here on the show. Wish you the best of luck, and we'll look forward to staying in touch.
It's been
Thanks
a
so much.
pleasure. Thank you so much, Brandon and Rachel.